Have you ever felt a piece of art was watching you? Not in a metaphorical sense, but a literal, unnerving stare that follows you as you move. Most art is designed to capture a moment, a memory, a feeling. But some creations are different. They don't just capture a moment, they trap it. They become a window, not into the artist's soul, but into a place that should have remained unseen. A doorway to a world that is cold, dark, and desperate to get out. This is the story of such a window. A simple painting of a boy and a doll that became known as the most haunted work of art in the world. It began in 1972 with an artist named Bill Stoneham. He found an old photograph from his childhood, a picture of himself at 5 years old, standing in front of a glass door in his grandmother's Chicago apartment. Using this photo as inspiration, he painted a strange and unsettling scene. In the painting, a young boy with a blank, vaguely troubled expression stands beside a tall, life-sized doll with empty black sockets for eyes and a strange, jointed body. Behind them is the glass door, but pressed against it from the darkness on the other side are dozens of small, disembodied hands, as if trying to push their way through. Stoneham titled it, "The Hands Resist Him." The painting was first displayed at a gallery in Los Angeles. The initial reception was one of disquiet. People were drawn to it, yet repelled by it. They spoke of feeling sick, dizzy, or overcome with a sense of dread while looking at it. The first owner of the gallery where it was shown, Henry Seldes, died within a year of the exhibition. The art critic who reviewed it, a man named Dennis Morgan, also died within a year, and the actor John Marley, known for his role in The Godfather, purchased the painting, only to die a few years later. The painting then vanished, seemingly lost to the art world for over 2 decades. Its story resurfaced in the year 2000, not in a high-end gallery, but in the burgeoning digital marketplace of eBay. An anonymous couple listed the painting with a description that was not a sales pitch, but a frantic plea for help. They claimed they had found it abandoned behind an old brewery. They took it home, thinking it was a peculiar but interesting find. Their young daughter, they wrote, immediately claimed that the children in the painting were fighting and would come into her room at night. She was so terrified that she refused to sleep in her own bed. The couple, unnerved by their daughter's terror, set up a motion-activated camera in the room where the painting was hung. They captured several photos. In them, the boy in the painting appeared to be exiting the frame, his small figure climbing down, as if using the ornate frame as a ladder. The doll, they claimed, was sometimes holding a gun or a weapon, threatening the boy to make him leave. They wrote of a psychic sickness, a malevolent energy that filled their home. Their listing was filled with disclaimers, absolving themselves of responsibility for whatever happened to the next owner. They just wanted it gone. This is where our story truly begins. with a man named Daniel, a curator for a small, struggling online gallery specializing in outsider and unusual art. Daniel was a pragmatist, a man who believed in brushstrokes and provenance, not ghosts and curses. He saw the eBay listing and the frantic story as a brilliant, if unintentional, piece of performance art. This wasn't a haunted object. It was a modern myth in the making. Owning the haunted eBay painting would be a huge publicity stunt for his gallery, a conversation piece that would draw thousands of visitors to his website. He saw it as a calculated risk, a shrewd business move. He placed the winning bid, and a week later, a large, flat package arrived at his small gallery, which was also his home office. As he unwrapped the bubble wrap and cardboard, he finally saw the painting with his own eyes. It was larger and more imposing than it looked in the photos. The colors were muted, the details strangely precise. The boy's face was eerily vacant, and the doll beside him radiated a profound sense of wrongness. But it was the hands on the glass door that truly captivated him. They were indistinct and childlike, yet they seemed to writhe with a desperate, silent energy. Daniel hung the painting on the main wall of his office, a place of honor. He spent the first day admiring it, writing a detailed blog post about its bizarre history and his acquisition of the infamous piece. He felt a thrill, the excitement of owning something with such a notorious story. That night, as he worked late on his computer, he began to feel a strange chill in the room. He checked the thermostat, but it was set to a comfortable temperature. The cold seemed to be localized, emanating directly from the wall where the painting hung. He dismissed it as a draft, a quirk of his old building. He went to bed, but his sleep was plagued by unsettling dreams. He dreamt he was standing in a dark room, looking through a glass door. On the other side was his own brightly lit office, but it was empty. He felt a desperate urge to get back into the room, to escape the oppressive darkness behind him. But he couldn't move. He felt small, cold hands begin to press against his back, pushing him towards the glass. He could see his own reflection in the door. He was a small boy, and standing beside him was the tall, empty-eyed doll from the painting. He woke up with a jolt, his heart pounding. The next day, he felt exhausted and on edge. He tried to work, but he found his eyes repeatedly drawn to the painting. He could have sworn the doll's head was tilted at a slightly different angle than it had been the day before. It seemed to be looking less at the boy and more directly out of the canvas, at him. He took out his phone and snapped a quick photo to compare with the original eBay listing. He told himself it was just a trick of the light, his tired mind playing games after a bad night's sleep. But the seed of unease had been planted. The strange occurrences began to multiply. He would hear faint, scratching sounds coming from the office after he had locked it for the night. They sounded like fingernails dragging lightly against a canvas. His cat, a normally placid animal, refused to enter the office, hissing and spitting at the doorway. One morning, he came in to find a stack of papers from his desk scattered across the floor, but only in the area directly beneath the painting. The window was closed, and there was no draft. It was as if a sudden, violent gust of wind had erupted from the painting itself. Determined to debunk what he was experiencing, Daniel set up a high-definition webcam on a tripod, aimed directly at the painting, set to record all night. He wanted to catch the explanation, to prove to himself it was just a loose floorboard or a rodent in the walls. The next morning, he eagerly reviewed the footage. For hours, there was nothing but the silent, still image of the painting. But then, at exactly 3:33 a.m., the video file became corrupted. The screen dissolved into a mess of digital static and loud, screeching white noise for a full minute before returning to normal. The most terrifying incident happened when his sister visited with her 7-year-old son, Liam. Liam, who loved to draw, wandered into the office while the adults were talking. A few minutes later, he ran out, his face pale and tears streaming down his cheeks. He was clutching a crayon drawing. When his mother asked what was wrong, he refused to speak, only pointing a trembling finger back at the office. Daniel's sister went to look at the drawing. It was a crude, childlike replica of the painting. But in Liam's version, the boy was on the floor, and the doll was standing over him, holding a long, black stick. Daniel felt a cold dread wash over him. He went into the office. Liam was nowhere to be seen, but the door was now closed. Daniel tried the handle, but it was locked from the inside. He knocked, calling his nephew's name. There was no response, only a faint, rhythmic thumping sound from within. Panicked, he shouldered the door open. The room was empty. Liam was not there. But the painting had changed. The boy was no longer standing. He was gone. The space where he had been was now empty canvas. Daniel stared in disbelief, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. He heard his sister scream his nephew's name from the living room. He ran out to find Liam huddled behind the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. When they finally calmed him down enough to speak, he whispered the same horrifying words over and over again. The doll pushed him. The doll pushed him, and he fell out. Daniel felt a wave of nausea. He slowly walked back to his office, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked at the painting again. The boy was back, standing exactly where he was supposed to be, his expression as blank and vacant as ever. Daniel couldn't rationalize it anymore. This was not a myth. It was not a publicity stunt. It was real. The terror he felt was suffocating. He took the painting down from the wall, wrapped it hastily in a thick blanket, and locked it in a storage closet. But out of sight was not out of mind. That night, the scratching sounds were louder, more frantic, coming from the closet door. He began to feel a constant, oppressive presence in his apartment. The feeling of being watched by unseen, childlike eyes. His home had become a prison, and he was trapped inside with something malevolent. He started researching the artist, Bill Stoneham, and found interviews where Stoneham discussed the painting. The artist admitted that the hands in the painting represented the other world, a realm of dreams and possibilities. The boy was himself, and the doll was a guide who would walk him through this realm. Stoneham seemed to believe the painting was a gateway, a membrane between worlds. Daniel realized with dawning horror that he hadn't just bought a piece of art. He had bought a door, and now something was trying to come through it. The final, terrifying confrontation happened a week later. Daniel was woken in the middle of the night by an overwhelming smell of ozone and stale, metallic air. The power in his apartment was out. The entire building was plunged into an unnerving, silent darkness. He fumbled for his phone, using its screen for light. As he sat up, he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. It was the sound of his office closet door creaking open down the hall. He held his breath, listening. He heard a soft, shuffling sound, like small, bare feet on a hardwood floor. He was paralyzed with fear, unable to move, unable to breathe. The shuffling grew closer. A small figure appeared in the doorway of his bedroom, silhouetted against the faint moonlight from the window. It was the size of a child. For a heart-stopping moment, he thought it was Liam. But then a second, taller figure appeared behind it, thin and unnaturally jointed. He knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that the boy and the doll were out of the painting. They were in his apartment. They were in his room. The boy took a hesitant step towards the bed. He didn't look threatening, only lost and deeply sad. But the doll beside him was different. It radiated an aura of pure menace. Its blank, dark eyes seemed to absorb the light, and Daniel felt an ancient, hateful intelligence staring at him. He felt it was not a guide, as the artist had claimed, but a jailer, a malevolent entity that had trapped the spirit of the boy and was now using him to try and cross over into this world. Daniel finally found his voice, a choked, terrified whisper. "What do you want?" The boy didn't answer. He just stood there, his form shimmering slightly in the dim light. But the doll seemed to react. It raised one of its long, jointed arms and pointed a stiff, wooden finger directly at Daniel. A wave of intense, crippling cold washed over him, and a voice entered his mind. It wasn't a sound, but a feeling, a thought that was not his own. It was a single, repeated word. Out. It wanted out of the painting, out of the darkness, and it seemed to see him as a replacement. A primal instinct for survival finally broke through his paralysis. Daniel scrambled off the far side of the bed, grabbing a heavy maglite flashlight from his nightstand. He flicked it on, its powerful beam cutting through the darkness and landing squarely on the two figures. They recoiled, their forms dissolving like smoke in the harsh light. He heard a high-pitched, ethereal shriek that seemed to come from inside his own skull. He ran from the room, down the hall, not daring to look back. He could hear the shuffling footsteps scrambling behind him. He reached the office closet and fumbled for the light switch, but the power was still out. He shone his flashlight inside. The blanket he had wrapped the painting in was on the floor, and the painting itself was leaning against the back wall. The canvas was no longer a flat surface. It was shimmering, undulating like a heat haze, the scene within distorted and moving. It looked like a pool of dark water. He realized it wasn't just a door. It was a trap. The entity didn't just want out. It needed to pull something else in to take its place. The shuffling footsteps stopped at the office doorway. Daniel turned, his flashlight beam shaking, and saw the boy and the doll standing there. The doll was pushing the boy forward, forcing him towards the shimmering canvas. The boy was crying, silent, spectral tears running down his face. Daniel understood. The boy wasn't a monster. He was a prisoner. The true evil was the doll, the entity tethered to him. He had to help him. He had to close the door. In a moment of desperate, adrenaline-fueled courage, Daniel did the only thing he could think of. He grabbed the painting, holding it like a shield, and ran directly at the two figures. He aimed the shimmering canvas at them, hoping to force them back inside. As he collided with them, there was no physical impact. Instead, he felt an agonizing, soul-deep cold and saw a blinding flash of white light. He felt himself being pulled forward into the canvas, into the oppressive darkness behind the glass door, while a cacophony of children's whispers and screams filled his ears. He woke up on the floor of his office. Morning light was streaming through the window. The power was back on. For a moment, he thought it had all been a nightmare. But then he saw the painting, which had fallen against the wall. The scene was still and flat once more. The boy and the doll were back in their places, exactly as they should be. But there was one horrifying difference. Pressed against the glass from the dark side, amongst the dozens of small, indistinct hands, was one new, larger, and terrifyingly familiar hand. It was his. Daniel screamed and scrambled away from the painting, his mind shattering under the weight of what he was seeing. He had not closed the door. He had only escaped by leaving a part of himself behind, trapped in that dark, cold world on the other side of the glass. He had become one of them. He fled his apartment that day, leaving the painting, his gallery, his entire life behind. He checked himself into a psychiatric facility, unable to explain what had happened in any way that would make sense to the rational world. The painting was eventually recovered from the abandoned apartment by the building's owner, not knowing its history and seeing it only as a strange, unsettling piece of art. He put it in storage. For a few years, it remained dormant, locked away in the dark. But evil like that does not sleep forever. It was eventually sold again, as part of a lot of unclaimed property, making its way back into the world, ready to find a new owner, a new home to infest. Daniel never fully recovered. He was plagued by a constant, phantom coldness in his right hand, the hand he saw trapped in the painting. He lived in a state of perpetual fear, avoiding mirrors and reflective surfaces, terrified he would see the face of the lost boy staring back at him. He knew the doll, the true entity, was still out there, tethered to the canvas, forever looking for a way to fully escape its painted prison, forever looking for a new soul to trade places with. The legend of the hands resist him continues to grow. It is now kept in a secure, private gallery, but its image has spread all over the internet. Thousands, perhaps millions, of people have now seen it, and the strange reports continue. People who stare at a digital image of the painting for too long report feeling uneasy, anxious, or even physically ill. Some claim to see the figures move in the corner of their eye. Printers have been known to malfunction when trying to print a copy of the image. It seems the painting's influence is no longer confined to its physical canvas. The window has been opened, and now countless smaller windows exist on computer screens and phone displays all around the globe. The curse has gone viral. The artist, Bill Stoneham, has been contacted many times by people terrified of the painting. He has offered to perform an exorcism or have the painting spiritually cleansed. But the current owners have, for their own reasons, refused. And so the painting remains as it is, a vessel of quiet, waiting malice. What is truly trapped within that canvas? Is it the spirit of a lost boy, a guide to the dream world, or something far older and more malevolent? And what of the hands that press against the glass? Are they other trapped souls, like the piece of Daniel that was left behind, forming a silent, desperate chorus? They are a permanent audience to the grim tableau of the boy and his sinister guardian, and a constant, chilling reminder of the painting's terrible power. So the next time you find yourself scrolling through strange images on the internet, and you come across that unsettling picture of a boy and a doll standing before a glass door, perhaps you should look away. Resist the urge to stare too deeply into the boy's vacant eyes. Do not try to count the hands on the glass, because you never know what might be looking back at you. You may think you are just looking at a painting, but you might actually be looking through a window. And some doors, once you look through them, can never truly be closed again.